Hi, I'm Tom Landon from Blue Ridge PBS and Echo, and I want to welcome you to a very special program produced by our own Sadie Hartzog. It's the second in our occasional series called Field Notes, which captures live performances shot on location. In 2016, Roanoke Lee Hunsaker had a vision of a curated live storytelling event for Southwest Virginia. A writer who comes from a long line of storytellers, Lee started by hosting a series of small events, and the word grew. Called Hoot and Holler, the stories usually follow a theme, which can be anything from tales about first dates, frenemies, salvation, or even a life in drag. The program you're about to see was recorded at the historic Grandin Theater in November of 2021, and the theme for the night was Serendipity. It features tales of loss, love, and travel. Warning, these stories are told by grown-ups for an audience of grown-ups and may feature adult situations, so we've tried to take care to bleep any words that you might find offensive. But parents may want to watch the stories first and decide if they're appropriate for children. Finally, the views expressed in these stories are those of the storytellers alone and may not reflect the opinions or attitudes of Blue Ridge PBS or Echo TV.
Our next storyteller, also a Hoot and Holler fan favorite. He's an educator and television producer who loves his wife, children, and the Grandin Theater. We're about to play a little song, and he requests that the audience sing along if you know it, and I bet you do. Please welcome Mr. Tom Landon.
I want to start this, the theme is serendipity, and I just feel like a disclaimer is in order. I'm a 58-year-old white man born to college-educated parents. I have a little privilege, and serendipity has followed me my whole life. So, that said, I came to Roanoke 1985, wasn't long before I got a job working for a small video production company. It was a good job for a 22-year-old guy, traveled a lot. My boss was maybe a little less than ethical, but it was fun. This is when I learned that I was kind of a 7-year guy. I'll explain what I mean by that. I met my future wife. She saw what I was going through at work, and she said, you know, I think maybe you're a little better than this. And she encouraged me to go back to school, and she said, I think you'd be a great teacher. That idea had never occurred to me in a million years. I was not what you would call teacher material in high school, for sure. But she turned out to be right, and that was how I found myself teaching middle school social studies. Special place in heaven for middle school teachers. So and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, probably most because I have about an 8th grade sense of humor. So that helped. But I remember in year 6 or so of teaching, there was a dark morning before the clocks changed when I pulled up to a brick building with my greasy sandwich in a bag. And I thought, I'm really going to go in this building and I'm not going to come out. It's probably going to be dark by the time I come out. And is this really how I want to spend my time? And thankfully, right about that time, a friend of mine who worked at Blue Ridge Public Television called me. It's now called Blue Ridge PBS, but we were Blue Ridge Public Television back then. She called me and she said, I got a job for you. I'd like you to come and be a trainer for teachers. I'd like you to drive around the western part of the state, teach teachers how to use digital cameras and all kinds of things like that. And I ended up loving that job, and I ended up producing television and having a show, and it was a lot of fun. And about 6.5 years in, we got a new boss. It's Veterans Day, so I don't want to besmirch veterans, because he was as military as they get. But he and I just didn't see eye to eye, and it became clear that it was not going to work. One day he came to me, and the latest thing he was going to ask me to do, he says, somebody's using the conference room today, and they are from the Department of Education. And so your job is to make them coffee and make sure they can get on the Wi-Fi, and don't leave the building until they're done. I'm like, all right, whatever. Guy walks in, I said, what are you here for? What are you doing today? And he said, we've launched this online school. We're in our second big year. We're hiring a bunch of social studies teachers for these online teaching positions. Serendipity. So I go back to my office, I email him my resume. 2 weeks later, I'm a social studies teacher for Virtual Virginia. And that was great. I loved it because it gave me the freedom not to go into a brick building. It gave me the ability to work on my front porch, gave me the ability to work in my pajamas, gave me the ability to follow my wife when she got a fellowship at Harvard, and I didn't have to give up my job or my benefits because I just did my job from Cambridge. It was great. But after a few years of teaching the same thing, I did start to get a little stuck, and maybe it was not as hard for me as it should have been to do the job. And I didn't get itchy to quit, and thankfully some really smart people I work with said, have you ever thought about being a school administrator? Now, I'd had a lot of run-ins with school administrators in my school. I never thought of myself as the man. Still don't. But I thought, that's an interesting idea, and I did. I went back to school and I got my administrative license. And a few years later, I found myself as the director of instruction at Virtual Virginia, which means we had kind of two of us who were second in command. And what I learned is that when you're a school administrator, you don't get the summers off, first of all. And the end of the school day is not the end of your work day. And everybody has your phone number, and everybody has your email address. And the longer you do it, the more people have your phone number, and the more people have your email address. So as I got into what would have been my 14th year, I went to my boss and I said, look, this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. Don't really like the 60-hour work weeks. My wife's doing pretty well. I think I'm going to take a break. So you should look for another director of instruction next year. It took me a long time to say that because we really had a good working relationship. And I told him that in January of 2020. Something happened in March of 2020. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. But all hell broke loose, right? And as one of the people who was running the state's online high school, I had a pretty important job at that point. I became an essential worker. I don't think I'd ever thought of myself as essential before that time, but I was. I mean, it was really important. 450 schools, 132 school divisions, the governor saying our name at press conferences. It was heady time for an online school administrator. And even though I said I wasn't going to sign my contract, it felt like the wrong time to leave. It would have been wrong. So I hung in there. So you know what? I'll give it another year. Yes, this is my 14th year. 7 times 2, 14. But 60-hour work weeks turned into 80-hour work weeks. Went on vacation to Maine and didn't stop working the whole time. Stopped sleeping well. Stopped exercising. Lost my appetite. And one day I noticed that when I walked by my office at home, I really didn't want to go in. And within a couple days, I noticed that when I sat down in my chair, it felt like an electric chair. My whole body was buzzing. And I couldn't eat, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't shut it off. And my smart wife said, "It sounds like you might be having an anxiety attack." Have you heard of these things, panic attacks? Don't recommend them, 1 star. And it was true, I couldn't work, I physically couldn't work. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. And it was weird. Called my doctor, I have a great doctor. Xanax, have you heard of Xanax? 5 stars. 5 stars. That helped. Was able to sleep a little bit, started exercising, felt a little better. Good therapist, Once a day for a week, once a week for a month, then every month. That really helped. Friends were helpful. But this was in August, and I just never said goodbye to my friends at work. I just quit working. I just couldn't do it. They were great about leaving me alone. It got to be December, and it was clear, I already knew I wasn't coming back, but that was when I officially gave my notice. My sick days were running out. I just had to take a break. I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Anybody else have that problem? And I really didn't know what to do, but I got a little better, I hope, at doing things like cooking. Beth was on deadline, serious stuff, and I cooked more, and I hopefully cleaned a little more. The basement got cleaned for the first time ever. And then, I would say it's out of the blue, it's not quite true, but I got a call from the Virginia Film Commission. It turns out they were making this TV show in Richmond and Clifton Forge. You might have heard of it, it's called Dope City. And would I be able to help with the location team? And the only reason they called was that half of the location team that was supposed to go to Clifton Forge had either COVID or COVID exposure, and they were in hotel rooms in Richmond. And so they called, and I said, sure, get me out of the house. I'm sure Beth was very happy about this. And I got in the car for a couple weeks. I drove to Clifton Forge, and I did things like help them figure out where to park the dumpster, where to put the porta potty. At what time did all the merchants on Main Street in Clifton Forge have to have their cars off the streets? This was important movie-making material. I really loved it. It was really fun. I wasn't in the union, so I didn't get to be there when they were actually filming, but I would be somewhere else setting something else up. It was great. After the 2 weeks were up, they kept me on for a little while longer. It was really fun. I'm driving around and finding the roads that Michael Keaton was going to drive his Ford F-150 down that would look pretty. It was a good job. But it ended. And when I came back home after that, I felt a little better. Like I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I feel like things are looking up. It was right about that time. By now I'm sleeping, I'm eating, feeling pretty good. And I get a call out of the blue from Big Bird. No, not actually, but from Blue Ridge PBS. And they said, we've got some state funding to do education work again. They had lost it during the recession. And would I like to come back and help them figure out what to do with that money and how to bring the station into a more modern stance and do more with video on demand and all kinds of other things. And I said yes, but I'm not starting until August. I took the rest of the summer and I enjoyed myself. I walked in the building to the same office I had had 15 years before at Blue Ridge PBS. And it's been great. I'm producing shows, I'm having ideas like us being here tonight. And I feel really good. And I don't really have a moral to the story other than make good friends who will give you good advice. Listen to your body when you need to stop doing something that's not good for it anymore. And it doesn't hurt if 30 years in advance you marry a New York Times bestselling author.